January 15th. It is 11 a.m., so we're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us for the Youth Supplemental Survey Training. That's what we're going to go over today. And before we begin, I'd love to introduce you all to today's presenters. My name is Laura Drasic. I work here at IHCDA as the Youth Program Analyst alongside Jean Hidalgo. She is the Youth Program Manager. Unfortunately, she's not able to be here today, but she's put a lot of time and energy into this training as well. And then we have Anissa Evans-Tucker. Anissa, you want to give yourself a little introduction, and then we can go to Cherie, Nish, and Amanda.
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Anissa Evans-Tucker. I'm the Older Youth Initiatives Manager here with the Indiana Department of Child Services. Thank you.
Lovely. Cherie?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cherie Jones. I am the Homeless Education Specialist for the Indiana Department of Education. Thank you all for coming out.
Amazing. And Nish?
Hello, I'm Nishwargo Proshun, but I go by Nish. I'm a member of the Indiana Balance of State Continuum of Care Youth Advisory Board. That's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm overjoyed to be doing this meeting with you guys and teaching you guys about the supplemental survey and the PIT count.
So excited you're here, Nish. And Amanda?
My name is Amanda Hoff. I am the Executive Director of Kids in Crisis Intervention Team. We call ourselves KIC-IT for short, and we work with youth and young adults who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness in Johnson County.
Amazing. Thanks, Amanda. Just to give everybody kudos, these presenters have put so much time and energy into this training. So thank you all for being here and putting all of your energy and effort to listening to our presentation. But all right, so today our agenda, we're going to do a very overview of the Youth Supplemental Survey, what it is, why we are implementing this survey, and how. And then we're going to walk through the actual survey. We have some screenshots of what the actual survey looks like, and we're going to talk about some best practices. So we're hoping that this training will be very clear and concise, and we'll leave some space at the end for questions and discussion. Okay, so at the most basic understanding of what the Youth Supplemental Survey is, it is an electronic survey that's designed to capture youth and young adults that do not qualify under HUD's definition of homelessness. So these young people would not therefore be included in the point in time count. And so that is why this survey has been created. Why is the Youth Supplemental Survey necessary? Well, we have about 3 main reasons why we want to implement this survey. Number 1 is that we are desiring to capture the data on the young people in our state that are left out of the point in time count. So we want their voices and their stories heard. Second, this data that we capture about their experiences with housing could exponentially help our balance of state get more funding, specifically for young people and youth and young adult housing. So essentially, the more data that we have on young people's experience with housing and housing insecurity, the better. And then finally, number 3, we currently at IHCDA and the Balance of State have funding through the Youth Homelessness Systems Improvement Grant. And one of those projects, a part of that grant, is to conduct a statewide needs assessment. This needs assessment is seeking to gather data and information on things like identifying the gaps in the youth homeless response system, or identifying the needs of young people when it comes to housing. And so this data from the Youth Supplemental Survey will add to that data that we're trying to collect in the statewide needs assessment. Okay, so you've heard a little bit about what the survey is and kind of an overarching view of why it's necessary. We need this to supplement the point in time count. But before we get into a little bit more of who the Youth Supplemental Survey is for, Nish is going to go over a brief overview about what the point in time count is and who the point in time count is for to hopefully help differentiate between the two. Take it away, Nish.
So the point in time count is essentially a count of sheltered and unsheltered people that are experiencing homelessness. It is an attempt at a census which occurs on a single night in January. Essentially, they try to take everybody who's homeless or experiencing homelessness and just try to figure out where everyone's at on a single night in January. And the people that are counted are specifically in category 1 for homelessness, which means literal homelessness. So, for example, that would be if you're residing in places not meant for humans to live, such as car parks, buildings, or sleeping in your car. If you're in transition, residing in hotels or motels, which are paid for by the government, so you're not paying for them. If you're in an emergency shelter, or you're leaving an institution where you were previously literally homeless. And so, sorry. And so, sorry, youth and young adults for that should also be included in the point in time count.
This is kind of just like an overview of that definition of what is HUD Category 1, literally homeless, and how that might relate to a young person experiencing HUD Category 1 homelessness. One of the main kind of differentiations I like to point out is that young person residing in an emergency shelter. That could be a young person who is an adult, age 18 to 24, and perhaps DCS is not involved with that. Or it could be a minor, so somebody age 14 to 17, and they may be with their family in a shelter. So those young people would be included in the point in time count. Okay, so who is the Youth Supplemental Survey for? This would be, sorry, go ahead, Anissa.
Okay, no problem. So the Youth Supplemental Survey is for youth and young adults ages 14 through 24. Again, Nisha gave us a really good overview of what that means. So youth that are doubled up or couch surfing, youth in hotels or motels that a governmental agency or organization is not paying for, and then a youth residing in a shelter. And DCS may be involved. And that this is very critical because that is a very short window of opportunity. If you can go to the next slide, please. Because typically a young person in a shelter that DCS has paid for or placed, those young people would not be involved. So there is a very, very short window where the supplemental survey can be provided. And that is when maybe you have called DCS and we are conducting the assessment, but nothing has been legally done and we have not placed. That would be the time where the youth could qualify to take the survey. Other than that, again, DCS involved youth would not be involved because we have then placed, even if we have placed the young person in your shelter, that is then considered a placement under DCS policy. So there is that very short, very, very short window of opportunity that we wanted you all to be aware of. But overall, DCS youth would not be involved in the supplemental survey. Thank you.
Okay, so just a brief overview of kind of the Youth Supplemental Survey, what young people and youth are involved, and versus the PIT count. So a young person who would be counted as a part of the PIT is a young person who may be in transitional housing, a young person who may be living in their car or living out in a park or a place not meant for human habitation. It could also be a young person who is staying in a hotel or motel and it is paid for by a nonprofit or maybe a government agency. And then also a young person who may be in a non-youth emergency shelter and they may be an adult, 18 to 24 range, or perhaps they're a minor and they're with their family. Versus the young people who we are trying to capture in the youth supplemental survey. So these are young people who are not included in the point in time count. These would be young people who you know are doubled up or couch surfing, which we know a lot of young people do. So we want that data on those young people. And then also potentially young people who may be staying in a hotel or motel that's not paid for by an organization or the government. So maybe they're paying for it, or maybe someone else in their life is paying for them to stay in a hotel. Those young people would be captured in the supplemental survey. And then, as Anissa mentioned, if a young person is in a youth emergency shelter and maybe DCS has been notified, but that youth has not yet been placed, that small window of maybe there isn't a placement yet, we want those young people captured in the supplemental survey. I saw in the chat and ask about these slides being shared. Yes, we will definitely share them. And I know it can kind of get a little bit gray in some areas when it comes to who should be included in the supplemental survey versus the point in time count. And so if you're having questions about that, please put those in the chat. I know Anissa, Mishuri, and Amanda and Nish can answer those questions for you as well as they come. Okay. So overarching, who should implement them? Who should implement this survey? These are just a few lists, but we're hoping that youth-facing agencies will definitely be the ones to administer this survey and share it out. So that could be supportive services, mental health facilities, youth shelters, safe places, additionally educational facilities. We're going to hear a little bit in time from Cherie about McKinney Vento Liaisons. Hopefully we have some in the training today. Higher education housing departments are a great place to implement this survey. And also community organizations. So places in your community like public libraries, this could be a great place to talk about the survey or even share the QR code to the survey, faith-based organizations, community centers. And as I'm going through these lists, if any of you think of any other ideas, please put those in the chat. So if you can think of anything else that we haven't thought of, please let us know. That'd be a great resource for us to send things out to. All right, now Amanda and Amanda and Cherie are going to talk about how to implement the youth supplemental survey.
So last year, our organization participated in giving the youth supplemental surveys to our clients. So we learned a few things and also are trying to get even more participation this year. So a few things about how to implement the youth supplemental survey. They can be taken individually by the youth themselves or with the assistance of an adult. So if you have a youth or young adult who is unable for any reason to answer or to type it in, or if they have a disability, anything like that, you can definitely assist them with that as long as you input their answers directly. So the answers that they give you, ask the questions exactly how they're written in the survey and then input their answers. And it can also be helpful for those clients who or students that you encounter. Maybe you're not going to be meeting with them during the week of the 26th when the supplemental survey is going to be given. So you can also either email or text them the QR code, or you can complete the survey with them over the phone. And from our experience, it actually is more effective doing it alongside of the youth, either sitting with them while they're doing it or going over it with them. And we definitely would love for everybody to share this with your connections, the young people in your networks or in your community, all of those organizations that you know that are going to be coming in contact with youth and young adults who are experiencing housing insecurity. We'd love for you to share the survey, and the brief that IHCDA created is really helpful. It's just a one-sheeter that kind of explains everything. And so inviting as many people to participate as possible. Another thing that our organization does, we have an incentive program. So we give our clients additional points for their incentive program for filling out the survey. So if you have something similar to that, that's just an additional little incentive. And of course, explaining to them what the importance of making sure that their voice is heard is so important, that they feel empowered by sharing this information, so that they know we want to hear from them, and we want to help and to get more help at a funding level for them. And there's also a lot of ways that this can be implemented in educational institutions. And Cherie Jones is here. She's from the Department of Education, and she's going to share some more ways that McKinney Vento Liaisons can get this survey to the youth that they serve.
Thank you, Amanda. So for McKinney Vento Liaisons, right, this should be really easy. So that age group of 14 to 24, normally, well, in Indiana public schools, a student can attend school until the age of 22. But so for those 14 to 22-year-olds that are enrolled inside of your school district, this should be really easy for you, because according to the McKinney Vento Act, our liaisons should be meeting with unaccompanied homeless youth regularly. So this can be covered during one of your meetings, or uh, one of the times that you're able to sit and talk to your unaccompanied youth. I agree with Amanda that if you are putting the information in for the student, that the student should be there with you as you are typing in the answers or responses to the survey for the student. Also, liaisons, according to the act, we all are supposed to collaborate with our community partners. So reach out to your community partners that you know serve our homeless youth within that 14 to 24 age range, to provide them with the survey and the brief. If there are any additional questions, you all can feel free to email myself, or go to the IACDA website for more information. But know that I am always available to help as usual. And with your unaccompanied homeless youth, let's keep in mind that we want to keep them in the school. We want to keep them on the track to their academic success. So when asking the students to come in to complete the survey, please be as flexible as possible. Again, there are several ways that the survey can be completed. We don't want to push our students, but we would like for the survey to be completed on their behalf, so that the data that is used from this survey can be used, hopefully, to encourage some more educational supports for our homeless youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherie. All right. We are going to go through now a walkthrough of the actual survey itself. So as we go through this, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I know there was one question, so I may get to that question right at the end after the walkthrough. But if you have questions about the survey as we go through, please let me know. So the first question is simply if an adult is assisting them with the completion of this survey. So we do want to know if maybe a McKinney Vento liaison, a case manager, or a guidance counselor, parent, or guardian is helping. And if that's the case, then that adult interviewer will include their name, and then perhaps the name or the organization or school affiliation that they're associated with. Then this section is all about the youth and young adult responses. So we would love to know the county of their current residence, and then their initials and their year of birth, simply for deduplication purposes. So this is the only information that we want in order to know, to make sure that we're not getting multiple responses of the same people. That county of current residence is really helpful to help us understand the regional data for the balance of state. But that's the only other, those are the three kind of personal information questions we're asking regarding for deduplication purposes. Okay, then we get into the threshold questions. These are the questions that the young person has to answer that makes them qualify for the supplemental survey. So again, the young person has to be between the ages of 14 and 24. And then if they've already completed the survey, they're not able to take it again. And then if the young person qualifies as category 1, which is that definition listed right there of residing in emergency shelter, transitional housing, hotel or motel paid for by a charitable organization, or perhaps they're staying in a place not meant for human habitation. If they qualify for that, they would be included in the PIT count, so they do not need to take this youth supplemental survey. So if the young person answers, no, I'm not between the age of 14 to 24, or yes, I've already completed the survey, or yes, I qualify for the PIT count, it will take them to the end of the survey where they'll be asked about some McKinney Vento resources, but they would not qualify for the youth supplemental survey. If the young person does qualify for the point in time count, there is a question that will pop up that will ask them if they were interviewed about their housing situation for the point in time count. And if not, then there will be a resource and a link to the point in time count survey and our HMIS team. Okay, then the survey goes into a question about their current housing situation. It'll ask them if they are currently staying with a parent or legal guardian, and that will determine if they are an accompanied or unaccompanied young person. And it will also ask them if they have children. If they say yes, that they do have children, a few more questions will appear. We'll ask them how many children do they have, and then also if those children are currently residing with them. The number of children that is residing with them helps us provide us with more data on, okay, so you are not the only young person that is experiencing housing insecurity. Your children may also be experiencing that as well. If their children are not residing with them, they have the ability to put 0 in that number box. All right. The next questions after that are specifically about describing their housing situation between the window of time for the youth supplemental survey. So they'll be able to select as many options that apply to their housing situation within that time frame. And then if none of those housing situations specifically describe what they've been experiencing, a drop-down will appear and they're able to type in whatever description they would like. Then the next question after that is about how long did they sleep in that housing situation? And that just helps us determine the status of their chronic homelessness. All right. After those questions, there is a question about have any of the following contributed to your unstable housing situation? And so this is a very subjective question. They get to decide what they think contributed to their housing situation, and they can choose as many as they would like, and they can also choose other. So if they believe that maybe a situation on this list does not include or describe why they believe they're unstably housed, they can type that into a text box as well. And then we'd like some information about demographic questions. They can always prefer not to answer. They can always include, select as many options as possible. And again, if they don't believe that they are being represented in the options available, they can click the other checkbox and type in their response below. And that is the same with the question about gender. And then finally, we have a few questions about domestic violence. This helps us, so for future funding, kind of knowing the population and what young people are experiencing. Participants specifically in this section can always prefer not to answer the question. So I think that's really crucial if you are assisting a young person with this survey, especially in a section of the survey like this, they can always prefer not to answer. And then underneath each question, there is a description on what can qualify as domestic violence. So I would very much encourage you, if you are helping assist young people with this, to perhaps read that description out to them. And then if they do select yes to that first question, then a second question will appear about how long ago that domestic violence experience did occur. And then specifically about their current situation, similar to the previous question, there is a description about what can qualify as fleeing or attempting to flee. And so we encourage you again to inform that young person about this definition, because it can be very, very helpful to know that what qualifies as fleeing or attempting to flee. It is important to note that this definition does include trafficking. And then finally, the last question of the survey is that we'd just like to know if the young person who's taking the survey is aware of their rights under the McKinney Vento law. There is a link right underneath there that provides student resources for them. And then going back to the beginning of the survey, if any of the young people did not qualify for the supplemental survey on those threshold questions, this is the slide and question that they will see at the end of the survey before submitting. Okay, before we jump into when the survey is taken and the link to the survey, does anybody have any questions? Maybe Amanda, Shri, Anissa, anybody put stuff in the chat while I was going through all of that?
It seems like there's several questions about whether or not to complete both surveys, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to address that.
Yeah. So take completing the youth supplemental survey and the PIC count?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if the young person, is the question about the same young person?
Right. So my understanding was if they qualify for the PIT count, then they should receive the PIT survey.
Correct.
And not the supplemental survey. So they would be taking one or the other. If it was the same individual, would not take both the PIT and the youth supplemental survey. So it's an either or situation. So if they're experiencing that literal definition of homelessness, they would take the PIT survey. And then if they're experiencing the McKinney Vento definition of homelessness, then they would take the youth supplemental survey. Is that right, Laura?
Correct. Yeah. So if the young person qualifies for the supplemental survey, then they do not qualify for the PIT count, because that's why the supplemental survey has been created, is to capture data on young people who do not qualify for the PIT. But at an agency level, we would like you to do both, like implement both. It's just that the young people taking the supplemental survey do not qualify for the PIT. Does that make sense? Let me see.
There looks like there was a specific case question.
Okay.
Amy Snyder, I don't know if you want to come off of mute to ask your question.
Okay, so we had a student, she was 18, senior. She ended up having to go live at our women's shelter, and she did graduate midterm, and she is going into basic training here within the next week or so. Is she still included in the survey, or since she's graduated, she's not considered a part of the survey?
From my understanding, if she's staying in a shelter, the women's shelter, she would actually count for the point in time count. The point in time count happens on the 28th.
And then, and what if she's already been deployed by that time?
Yeah, then she would not be captured in these surveys.
Okay.
That's my understanding. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? Okay.
No, but I did want to clarify when you said it because she's graduated, would she not qualify? This survey is for anyone ages 14 to 24, regardless of their educational status. If they've already graduated, if they're out of school or in school, as long as they're in that age range and then they meet those criteria, we would definitely want to capture their data, whether they're in school or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I also saw Christy asked if the survey is in Spanish. Unfortunately, it is not. That is something that we want to explore in the future for the supplemental survey. I believe it was in Spanish last year, but we've made a lot of changes to it this year. And that's something that we want to make sure we have accessible for Spanish speaking folks, but unfortunately, we do not this year. Thank you for that question, Christy. It's very important. All right. Going through the chat. Okay, thank you, Cherie, for answering those questions.
No worries. Laura, I do have something to say. Thank you, first off,
Yeah.
Jen, for bringing it up in the chat. For excuse me, for McKinney Vento Liaisons, please ensure when you are providing this survey or completing surveys on the behalf of your students that you have looked at your board policies and procedures to ensure that there's not an extra step that you need to take. As Jen stated, in her school district, they must go to parents of homeless children and youth who are all of their students, but for homeless children and youth who are residing with their parent or guardian. They have to actually, get their permission first. So definitely make sure you look at your school board policies and procedures to ensure that you are not in violation of doing those by providing the survey.
Thank you, Cherie. Okay, so when should you complete the supplemental survey? The survey is going to open on January 26th and it's going to close on January 30th. So that is about a 5-day window in that last week in January. And the hope is that this survey is going to supplement the PIC count. The PIC count happens on the end of that week, but we're hoping to capture more data on youth experiencing housing insecurity. So that's why we've extended it to multiple days. So again, the survey will open on the 26th and it'll close at the end of the day on the 30th. And then where can you take this? It is only an electronic version. We have a QR code here, and then we also have the link here to our JotForm survey. We'll definitely ensure that these slides are sent to you and that in a follow-up email after this webinar, you have this QR code, you have the link to the JotForm, and then I can also put it in our chat here too before we end. Any other final questions about the survey? Feel free to come off mute, put stuff in the chat. We have about 10 more minutes. If folks have questions, we can go back to slides. But if not, feel free to please contact any one of us here. We've got our emails here. You can find us on the IHCDA website. Thank you all so much. We'll stick around for maybe a few more minutes if folks have questions. Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody.